The small lake in the Sabah Upazila district in the capital Dhaka represents a spot where the once 8-story Rana Plaza building once stood. It serves as an eerie reminder of one of the world's worst industrial disasters. Only this month have perpetrators been formally accused of murder, and they are now being put on trial for the first time in over 3 years. The building collapse took the lives of more than 1,100 Bangladeshi garment workers, injured about 2,500, and has marked the lives of countless others, mostly family members of the victims. In all, 41 people have been charged. Out of these, 38 face murder and 3 for helping the main defendant, the owner of the Rana Plaza building, Sohail Rana, to escape. The accused persons include Rana's parents, owners of 4 factories, the mayor of the area, and 14 government officials. 35 of the suspects appeared before the court for the hearing, with the remaining 6 to be tried in absentia. All who appeared pleaded not guilty, and the trial will begin on September the 18th. If convicted of murder, the defendants face the death penalty. The collapse of the former commercial complex, built on swampy ground outside the capital, sparked demands for greater safety in the world's second-largest exporter of ready-made garments, and put pressure on global companies buying clothing from Bangladesh to act. A host of Western retailers had clothing made at the factories housed at Rana Plaza, including Italy's Benetton, Spain's Mango, and the British low-cost chain Primark. The disaster led to the immediate creation of 2 international coalitions designed to assess and help fund improvements to building and fire safety at the thousands of garment factories in Bangladesh. Most European retailers signed up to an accord on fire and building safety. Accord inspectors set out structural, electrical and fire safety improvement plans for most of the factories. But over 3 years on, about 70% of those plans are behind schedule. North American brands signed up with a different inspection group, which is called the Alliance for Bangladesh Worker Safety. Immediately following the disaster, the Bangladeshi government increased garment workers' wages by 76% and improved labour laws to allow a record number of unions into factories. But the initial push to improve safety standards have wavered, with factory owners dragging their heels on undertaking the expensive repairs deemed necessary by inspectors. Bangladeshi authorities have said all of the more than 1,500 factories they've inspected required safety improvements, and hundreds of other smaller outfits still need to be investigated, saying they need funds to inspect these. Bangladesh's politically powerful manufacturers have also pleaded for patience, pointing to the lack of funds to delays. Further industry improvements, they say, are coming. However, for many of the 2,000 survivors of the disaster and families of those who perished, say they've received little or no compensation following the building collapse. Many survivors suffered injuries so severe they are unable to work, and without sufficient compensation are unable to support themselves and their families. The Sabah Rana Plaza collapse was a structural failure that occurred on the 24th of April 2013. The building contained clothing factories, a bank, apartments and several shops. A day before, a TV channel recorded footage that showed cracks in the structure, which led to the immediate evacuation of the building. The shops and the bank on the lower floors closed down. However, the garments employees who worked there were ordered to return the following day by the owners, and the building collapsed during the morning rush hour. That fatal moment is still as painful as ever for those who are still awaiting true justice for the loved ones they've lost. Now joining me to discuss this is Sarah Ditty, Head of Policy at Fashion Revolution, which is a global movement which is born out of the ashes of Rana Plaza. And they campaign for the systematic reform of the fashion industry with a focus on the need for greater transparency in the fashion supply chain. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us. Firstly, so it's 3 years, individuals have finally been charged. Why has it taken so long?
Well, I can't really say why it took so long. I don't know the Bangladeshi judicial system enough to comment on that. But I think the general view from the industry and from us as well is that it's a much delayed step in the right direction. So as much as it's welcomed, I think we're also seeing that much more progress is needed to ensure the basic safety and rights of Bangladeshi garment workers.
So looking at the disaster itself, Of course, your organisation was born out of the ashes. So what is your assessment of the improvements in safety and working standards in Bangladesh so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been some important improvements in the industry since Rana Plaza, particularly the Accord on Fire and Building Safety has been a really positive step forward. Of course, it's a legally binding agreement between about 190 brands and trade unions and factories in order to work towards better health and safety for about 1,600 factories. And so some factories have been inspected. Some factories have had corrective action plans put in place. Some have actually been closed entirely, but improvements are happening much slower than anticipated. So a lot more needs to be done. I don't know. I think also some improvements have been that there's certainly a lot more public awareness about issues like Rana Plaza. We can definitely see that through the fashion revolution movement, but also I think there's been a lot more coverage in the media of these issues over the past 3 years, both more frequent and a deeper level of coverage in the media than ever before. So those are some positive improvements since Rana Plaza happened.
And in terms of what could be improved further, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one thing is, just the sheer slow uptake of these, very necessary improvements in the factories in which the Accord is doing inspections. Apparently 70% are behind schedule in making the much needed improvements, and 22 just haven't done anything at all. We definitely need more pressure, more support from brands and retailers to push forward and make those improvements. Also, there's a number of brands who haven't even paid compensation to Rana Plaza's victims, so companies like Bon Marché and Madeline. And I just think fundamentally workplace dangers are still endemic. Conditions on the whole haven't really changed all that much. Clothes that are destined for the shelves of big name brands are still being made in places that don't even have fire exits. Just simple health and safety requirements are still lacking. So we need a lot more support and pressure from the government, from the brands and retailers, from consumers.
So
I think also... Oh, go ahead.
No, carry on.
I think also collective bargaining and the right to form unions is still incredibly repressed in Bangladesh. Apparently, last year, the government rejected 73% of union registration applications. And unions are absolutely necessary. It's through unions that workers are able to speak out about things like their safety and their health concerns and their wages, which means that they can help in preventing horrible tragedies like Rana Plaza. So we really need a lot more public pressure and industry pressure around the ability to form unions for Bangladeshi workers.
In terms of the consumer now, of course, many may say that they are the root to the problem, because if they demanded more ethically produced goods, practices such as what happens in Bangladesh and other countries wouldn't happen.
I think for Fashion Revolution, that's an unfair amount of accountability put on consumers. Consumers certainly do have a part to play, but I think for Fashion Revolution, ultimately the future that we'd like to see is a fashion industry where when you're out shopping, you don't have to decide whether to buy the thing that's been made in an ethical way or buy the thing that's been made in an unethical way. So consumers, while they do have their part to play, I think it's also companies who need to give us more information about their practices and about the product that we're buying and how it's been made by whom and under what conditions. And
how would you propose they do that in terms of to bring it to the consumers?
Well, I think one thing that's definitely a step in the right direction is if more brands would begin to publish their factory lists. Some brands have done it, at least the factories that sew the garments, the factories that they have direct relationships with. And that way the public, concerned consumers or journalists or NGOs or unions are able to hold the brands to account for the factories that they have relationships with. So I think that's one positive step forward.
And in terms of course, everything you mentioned, do you think having a global inspection system, will take a long time? There's a lot of economic, geographic, political factors. Do you see progress, is going to be slow, but eventually Bangladesh will get there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think inspections and audits are part of the way forward. There's lots of issues and challenges around audits and inspections. Ultimately, auditing bodies are often profit-making companies themselves, and working in places like Bangladesh, where corruption is perhaps more common than other countries, that is a challenge for doing proper inspections and audits. But I think ultimately, companies really just need to be thinking long-term about their processes and practices and investing in improvements in these factories.
Okay, thank you, Sarah Ditty from Fashion Revolution for joining us. But that brings us to the end of this week's edition and this series of Asia Wide. We'll be back in a month where we'll be looking again at the issues facing the world's largest Muslim community. Until then, join the conversation online and share your thoughts at Islam Channel CA using the hashtag AsiaWide or email us at the address below. Have a great month and see you on the other side.